Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
Dustin Ray.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we're going to discuss how a non-technical founder can figure out when their IT people are bullshitting them. Dustin, why don't you kick us off? Because this is a problem that you experience as a software consultancy owner.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I've been hearing, I think, the entire time that I have been consulting, whether that's in the website space, like doing just kind of like informational websites or e-commerce websites, all the way to like application development, mobile app development. Doesn't matter the space. I've heard this problem come up. And essentially, it usually goes something like this, right? I've been working with this developer for a long time. I've built a lot of trust, some type of a relationship. However, from the business standpoint, things just don't seem right. Like they kind of have just there's some kind of sense that like it's not progressing the way that it should over time. So like some examples that they might have, they may say, okay, well, can you build this particular feature? The developer says, yes, it'll take me 3 weeks. So then 3 weeks go by, it's not done. They keep going. They kind of, start to erode trust that way where they're like missing these deadlines substantially. And then when the delivery comes in, it's like not quite right. And they're like, well, it's this and it's that. And then so the non-technical founder not having the experience around the context of like what's happening to the engineer or the developer that's working on it, they don't really know up from down. So kind of like whatever the developer is saying to them, it's like a foreign language. So it kind of comes to the point of, is this a true technical hurdle that we're trying to jump over as a company? Or is this a personal hurdle for this person, this developer? And I think that the other kind of way that this is kind of displayed is there's usually one developer, right? So there's kind of the lone wolf or the developer on an island key person problem as well. So they're kind of relying on this one developer that is, their technical go-to, right? And they've never done anything overtly to kind of break trust or anything like that. They seem like they have good intentions. They're responsive, in all other regards. They seem like they're working on the project or whatever. But how does the non-technical founder know what are like, true delays or true problems versus this guy just doesn't really know what he's talking about and we're kind of stuck and we need help?
Okay. I love this question. So let me, I guess, restate that more simply. I think so. You've got a non-technical founder or owner. He's hired or she hired a usually single developer, and the single developer is either taking too long, delivering the wrong things, or in this case, they're not worried about like the developer going dark and just disappearing and coming back with a bill for like 10,000 hours.
Right. That's a different problem.
That's a different problem.
That's not this problem. Yeah.
So this is the developer is responsive. They're there. The bills are reasonable. It's just, everything is taking longer. And when it's delivered, it's not quite right. And so then it has to be redone. And my first thing, well, I feel like I always start up with, I have watched too much Jonathan Stark. And so I channel, it's like, well, part of the problem is the billing hourly, blah, 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 blah. But the thing that really struck me first is it seems like the developer is taking too big of a step, right? If you're wondering if the developer is BSing you, it's a sign to me that the developer is trying to deliver chunks in too large of a feature set. And if they were delivering smaller pieces into production, you wouldn't be as concerned of, oh, well, this took a lot longer than I thought. And when I got it, it didn't do what I thought it was going to do. Because you would have smaller pieces delivered more often, and you would have, right? There's communication, but the communication, it's not right. It's more than the BS part. It's, hey, I don't get to communicate until you deliver this giant chunk. And that's where the trust problem is, because I don't know what your giant chunk is going to be. And I have no way to gauge it.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, at least with the iteration part, because I think if if you have rapport with somebody, then okay, 3 weeks can go by, and if we're a little late on something, it's because of this or that, or they're familiar with the project and they understand the ins and outs and why it would take a little bit longer than we would expect because it's just a tricky system that we're in or something. If you're fresh to the client, they've not worked with you before and you've never seen the code base that you worked on, and you don't provide updates like that, 3 weeks go by, that, yeah, I could see trust being eroded. So getting ahead of that, let's say you're 4 days in and you go, oof, that 3 week estimate, that looks like a little bit of a jumping the gun here. This is a stretch. So that's the part where you'd stop and say, hey, the original estimate here looks like it's going to be trickier than that. How do you want to approach this? Because it seems like it's, maybe a week or two off, and maybe even find a way to give them options on, we can try to do it this way instead if you found like another route that gets you within the deadline. But it's not, exactly what they asked for, but, give them the choice to compromise on that, Um, but either way, the communication is to me the way to get ahead of that without breaking the trust, or as much trust if they're, really, really picky about your original agreement and holding you to it.
Well, slightly differently, I would say if you've got like a 3-week feature that you're building and you're a lone wolf, right? So you're doing front end, back end, and all of it. One thing that I think would be important, right? Even if you can't deliver part of the feature, right? There's no slice that you could deliver to the customer. You could still, draw it on a piece of paper and be like, this is how I think this looks. Does that look right? And then get them to say yes or no, or to, say what seems wrong. Or the ever popular, dummy API, where you make an API that just returns canned data, and then you build the front end so that the customer can then look at the interactions and tell you how those, don't, now that they've seen it and they're working with it, they can tell you, oh yes, this interaction's clunky, let me do that. And while they're doing that, then you actually make the UI, make the backend real. Right? There are ways to deliver smaller chunks, even if those smaller chunks don't, in this case, the customer, the non-technical person who hired you is the customer, not the customer's customers. And so you iterate towards your customer, not their customers.
Right. Yeah, you started to touch on something that I think is really at the core of the problem to begin with is, and I've mentioned this framework before, but this is how I kind of use a framework to kind of push through product development. And I think if you don't have a framework going into a problem like this, you may go, hey, I want to build a product, go straight to a developer, build my product, right? And there's some steps in there that even if you go straight to your developer, you want to work with your developer to get through those steps so that you kind of have that kind of the agreement that you're talking about. Not a legal agreement, it can be, but it's about the kind of the scope, right? And the business requirements at hand. And what I've found is non-technical founders, it can even be non-technical product owners, it can even be technical product owners in a different role, right? Like it's common that they won't have all of the kind of experience or knowledge to know what goes into what they're asking for. Even if it sounds simple on the outside, right? You may look at a button, right, in a checkout page, right? And you think, okay, well, that's just a button in a checkout page. Do you know how many things happen when you click that button, right? Like there's so many things that are going to happen when you click checkout.
It's
And I think
the engineer's biggest fear, their confident friend who comes to them with, hey, I've got this app idea. And they've thought about all the richness they're going to get from this app idea, but none of the technical implementation details, not realizing nearly how complicated all those spinning wheels are.
Right. And so the framework is the 4D framework, right? So if you don't have like the definition around what does the checkout button do when you click it, you need that definition in order to kind of design the rest of the software, whether that's from a visual perspective or from, in our perspective, the engineering, like in the software design. Like how do we actually think about what needs to happen when that checkout button, does it do this, it does this, it does this, where in the database does that happen? Like the engineer needs to tie those things back to what you want to happen in the business for what we're calling the customer's customer, right? Like the end customer. So kind of all of that comes full circle with that 4D framework. So define, design, develop, deploy If you get straight to development without the definition in the design phase, then I think, Jeffrey, to your point, you get into these, well, it's been 3, 6, 12 weeks, and it's just delay, 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 no end in sight. Every demo I see works, but when I deploy it, it's chaos, right? Or when I get to test it, it's like it hasn't been tested by someone who actually used it, right? That's the common complaint that I hear. Like, engineers typically
Yeah.
can't test as a user if they don't understand the context well enough. So that's a common thing to work
Yeah.
through as well.
One thing that comes to mind with the whole, are they BSing me, is a lot of times delays like this come from not making decisions. So the developer's like, oh, well, it could work this way or it could work that way. Oh, I know, I'll just make it work either way. And then you've doubled the work instead of asking the question of the business person or product owner. It's like, well, should it do this or should it do that? Or I could not ask and make this, because we're developers. You can make the software work either way or both ways.
And I think there's kind of a negotiation there too. So I think it's kind of a two-way street, right? Like both the non-technical product owner and the developer should have that kind of conversation. And even if there's some conflict or disagreement, I think that's good and healthy, because at one point, the product owner may not realize what they're investing in. And I think that's the other problem that creates that fear of like, I don't know if I'm being taken for my money, because they know it's a lot of money coming out, kind of regardless of what scale you're at. Right. And so like, where is it going? Is it just going to the developer, going off doing whatever? Or is it going to like real engineering and investment that I'm putting into like essentially IP that will be the kind of the backbone of the business? And I think understanding where your money is going is part of that. And if you don't understand the requirements you're trying to achieve, you're just in this kind of exploratory, limbo forever.
Yeah, in that case, then you really are, as an engineer, maybe not intentionally, but inadvertently wasting their money and betraying their trust, because you didn't have good enough product outlines, so you're just kind of going through the motions, building building the wrong thing, and then like they're getting billed for, if you have an hourly agreement, they're getting billed hourly. They're not happy with that. It takes a long time. You redo it because you didn't understand it. It's in both people's best interest to make sure they've got exactly what's going to be written down before they begin. Because imagine, even if as the engineer you might go, okay, this project's actually too big for me. I thought I could do it, and then now that we've sat down and talked it through, and the product person has a better understanding of, or the product owner has a better understanding of what they want of it, you both have a better understanding of cost and time, cost from their perspective and time from yours.
Yeah, I think time is honestly a huge cost. I think every engineer that I've personally ever worked with grossly underestimates time, like the value of time. Like it's so easy to think like saving some dollars is like the most valuable thing. But sometimes if you can cut 3 months off of like getting to production or something like that, or like bringing a feature to market because it has one less thing, like, or it's not quite as cute or doesn't have the animation, whatever, like that's not going to be the thing that probably is the unlock for the business, right? So business is always just about unlocking like what is the highest leverage next problem to solve. So if the problem you're working on is not highest leverage, especially in those early stages where it's one product person, one developer, even if you're in a big company, if you're just 2 people going at it to bring a new product to market, you have to be ruthless with what you're going to both decide and cut from the product scope.
That's a good call out, because a lot of times the BS meter can go because there's a mismatch between what the developer thinks is important and what the product person thinks is important. And so the developer is working on, again, this is good faith people. Right. Different. We're ignoring the bad faith. Like the developer is working on something they think is really, really important, and the product person doesn't think it's important. And they could be, the developer could be right and the product person could be wrong, right? If the developer's like, hey, this is all PII and we need to encrypt it and make sure that, we're not going to leak medical information or something, then the developer could be right and the product person could be wrong. But if they can't communicate that, then the product person what is this bullshit about encrypting things at rest? And yeah,
Yeah.
you really need to
Yeah.
do that.
Right. Right. And especially with security things too, right? As an engineer, I think the pet peeve is kind of no one wants to do the security project until it's too late. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's obviously too late to do it. Um, so yeah, I think
Yeah.
that brings me to another point too, another kind of tactic that the product owner or non-technical founder, kind of whoever it is in the spot, can use, and that's the TNP shared roadmap. I think we've talked about that before as well. So what it means is a tech and product shared roadmap. So instead of just the product owner dictating, hey, I want this feature, then this feature, then this feature, then this feature, then this feature, what you actually want to do is merge the two roadmaps together of saying, well, what does the developer need in order to continue to deliver these features? Because there was probably a deadline, there was probably a rush, a crunch to hit the deadline,
Mm-hmm.
and then the deadline, passed, we got it out, we got it released. Now there was some cleanup that should have happened, but product owner is already behind on schedule because the last feature is taking longer than expected. So now it just keeps going out and out, and it's like an erosion, right? But it's also about, like, if you have a vehicle, right? You're not maintaining the vehicle. The maintenance that you're going to have to do when the engine shuts down is much greater than it would have been if you just took it to get the 15-minute oil change, right? Like the 5 times that you needed to do it, but before it was too late.
This is a separate conversation, but a great one, because tech debt certainly climbs. The payoff for that is astronomical if you don't address it at some point. But to your point too about the security thing, security is part of that. And I
Right.
remember talking to a co-founder about like security stuff and refactoring and tech debt, and they were like, "We don't care about that right now because nobody knows who we are, and our ship is sinking. And why would we spend all of our resources that could be 3 months of patching security stuff for 3 months of tech debt addressing
Mm-hmm.
instead of building a feature that could actually get us profitable? Because you could do all that and then our company just dies, and you've protected nothing." And I thought that was an interesting take because as an engineer, I want to do it the right way. I want everything to be perfect and HIPAA compliant if it needs to be, and everything encrypted if it needs to be. But from their perspective, they're like, if we can get an MVP out, we'll work on all the security pieces later because we need to test to see if this thing is even valuable. And so I was like,
Right.
oh, this is an interesting way to frame it because it's still the same dance between
Mm-hmm.
product or product owners and engineering and what they think is important at the time and that risk level.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of the stage that you're in matters a lot too, right? Because we're talking a lot about like really early stage, even like
Yeah.
pre-launch or new MVPs and a new platform and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. But then even I think the same persona we're talking about, they cross that one chasm where they're now in production, and it becomes, at what point do we prioritize like kind of survival versus enhancement? Um, because yeah,
Yeah.
let's say you're in the black, right? So you're breaking even between your tech costs and your people costs. You have a bunch of features on the roadmap that are confirmed, and you think that they're good, but you also have your engineers telling you, hey, we don't have, our keys are just wildly out. We're sending passwords, plain text. There's XYZ things that we're kind of dealing with. I think what you want to do is at least stack rank those and have, so
Right.
that, again, the business owner or whoever's kind of making those decisions at least understands the risk that they're taking, and they can kind of sign off on that. So I think it's all it really comes down to, like, the awareness, and say, like, it's not that you have to just unilaterally take the decision to do it, but you do have the responsibility to make the other party aware, I think, is the key.
Right. It comes back down to the, is this person BSing me? Right. If you can, like, if you're not super familiar with technology, if someone says, oh, you have to encrypt it or PI or HIPAA or whatever, when it comes to these things, all they're hearing is, oh, we have to spend 2 weeks on the Dukamajig and we have to, it's like you're just making up words to them. They don't know what these things mean.
Mm-hmm.
And that can seem like BS. It could be totally real from the developer's perspective. You're like, I've never heard of these things from the product owner's perspective. But that conversation about, is this person BSing me? That's where you can address those things. You can call it out and say, hey, just saying as an engineer, these things are expected from your platform. So I would expect you to want to address these things. We don't have to at this point because we're early
Mm-hmm.
stage, but calling them out, that helps build that trust too, I would say.
Yeah. But bringing it all back, like if you're asking, is the developer BSing you? you've got a delivery problem, like where they're either delivering wildly large chunks, which means that they're late, or you've got a communication problem, I think, where
Mhm.
they're trying to tell you something and you don't understand what they're telling you. But again, we've put the whole faker issue to the side, right? Where we're assuming that these are positive intent or well-meaning
Yeah.
people. So I guess maybe should we flip it around now, or should we do it as a separate second episode of, okay, that's how all that plays out. If this is a positive person who is trying to do the right thing, but the question was, how do you know if you're getting played?
Mhm.
So do we cover that now? How do you know if you get okay? Let's do
Sure.
it. So I think the first part is right, incremental delivery, right? If you've got somebody in there saying 3 weeks, then it's 5 weeks, then it's wrong, you got to get them to break it down. You need something every week. Right? That's the whole agile thing. That's literally what it was all about, is get me something small and then I'll tell you corrections and we'll course correct.
Mhm.
And even if it takes 5 weeks instead of 3 weeks, because we broke it down so many times, it's still going to be faster because at the end of the 5 weeks, the thing that we have is correct instead
Right.
of 3 or 5 weeks and then it's wrong. And so that's
Right.
the first thing is and if they can't deliver, then they can't deliver. I would also advise them to just check the commits. Working developers have a pattern, and if you don't see that pattern, like to go with a home remodeling or home contractor kind of a thing, usually what happens is the people come and they do work for a day and then they go away for a week or whatever, and that's why the project slips. It's not because they were putzing around in your house every day. It's because they weren't there. They weren't doing it.
Mm.
And your Git commits, the even if you don't know what you're looking at, there's going to be a number there, and if it's an extra level of maliciousness to actually fake that instead of the developers juggling too many clients.
Yeah, I think we even got to take a step back and say, for the non-technical founders and product folks out there, what we're talking about is there should be an audit trail for the code that your developer is working on. And I would say, and you guys, I'll take a hot take here. I have a strong opinion that professional developers check in their code every day. I mean, regardless of how far they've gotten or kind of what they've done, I check mine in several times depending on what I'm working on, like making checkpoints and stuff. But in my opinion, if developers are working on active development and they're not at least checking their code in, even for the sake of machine failure, right? It's just a free cloud backup, like automatically. Well, it's not free, but free. It's very, very inexpensive. But yeah, I think that I've worked with several clients where they don't have that audit trail at all. There's no Git necessarily. They may have Git, but the the owner doesn't have access to it, right? So there's also like an ownership aspect of I think if you are the non-technical founder, you want to be the one creating the accounts and giving people like keys to come in and do the work. To use your contractor analogy, you wouldn't just leave your door open for weeks and allow contractors in and out of your house. You would let them in and make sure who's coming and stuff like that. You would, if they needed access, you would probably give them, a special key and, change locks or do whatever, right? You would have some way to do that. And there are technical equivalents of that. And your developer, your engineer should be able to tell you what they're doing and prove it to you. There should be some form of an audit trail there that you can check.
Right. Okay, so that's are they working? And we're talking about iteration as working in smaller chunks so that it's less time wasting. How would a non-technical founder know if they're being BS'd about the developer, basically doing exploration, unnecessary exploration on their dime? So
That's a good one. I think the same thing applies where you need to go back to the 4D framework: define, design, develop, deploy. So if you get through definition, okay, we know exactly what we want it to do. Now you're going into design. There's probably, if it's a UI, there's a visual design. The engineer at that point should be doing the technical design. If there's some question marks, and I'm not sure how this is exactly. I'm going to kind of figure it out as I go. Red flag, right? Let's stop and solve the mystery first so that we can gain clarity on like the path that we're going, so we don't just wander in the woods aimlessly, right? And the technique for that, I mean, I call them spikes, but some type of technical spike that's time boxed, which then removes the risk from the non-technical founder of like paying infinity amounts to explore something that is potentially just a skill issue.
One thing I would call out too is, especially if you're dealing with, especially if you're in the situation where you're dealing with a solopreneur developer, shiny objects are really expensive, and you want them to be working on boring technologies. A question that you can and should ask is, have you used this technology before? Like, there's always a way, the previous generation of technology, right? Like, you can always take, PHP and MySQL and solve almost every problem that a early stage startup is going to have. Those two tools are probably all you need. And if you have something more interesting of a problem, you want them to have done it before, used whatever technologies they're going to use. You want them to have used it, because the worst thing that could happen, well, not the worst thing, but a bad thing that can happen is you pay this person a lot of money to explore and get this new technology working, and then they move on, and now you need to hire another person who's never used this new technology, shiny new technology. So you need to pay them money to get up to speed as well.
Right. Yeah, hiring for the most common types of languages out there is a pretty big one. Tried and true stuff, open source technologies that everyone knows and loves, not a brand new language that a famous company just came out with that you really want to try. And this is a perfect opportunity to try it.
Oh, that's another good one. Open source. So non-technical founders, how should you feel about open source? I heard this question. I've heard solo developers. To me, this is personally a red flag. If you hear a solo developer telling you that they're going to handwrite everything because open source software is insecure, I'd probably run away. Would be like my first reaction.
Don't hire that person.
Do not hire that person.
I will say that there are cases where that matters, right? And so you would say, well, when is the case that it matters, right? Like, why do some companies need to be so secure with their code, right? So there's like the concept in some companies of like red code, or there's higher security access that even normal engineers just don't have access to. And so what are those cases? To me, it's like pharmaceutical, medical, defense. Like, you will know if you are in that industry and you need to treat your software like completely handwritten, no outsides, air gapped, everything. Like, the likelihood that you are in that industry is very, very low, because you will know that you're in that industry, right?
Well, more importantly, if you are in that industry and you don't know about this stuff, then you are not capable of founding a company by yourself. You need a more technical co-founder.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, exactly right. And to that point, and you were making that point earlier, Jeffrey, 99% of startups, even successful ones, are not in those fields. So you do not have to be that type of founder to start one of these, technical software companies. Yes. I think the key is about the domain expertise, and just finding the right people to work with you is kind of the moral of the story today.
In fact, that would solve a lot of these problems if you just had one technical person that was a good buddy, and you just run it by him. This guy, this seems a little sketchy. What do you think? Yeah. See what he thinks.
Right.
I know a guy that does that, so reach out to me.
If you are a non-technical founder and you're hiring technical people and you need a high level of technical expertise, then you, the founder, are probably making the mistake. Because whether the coder is bullshitting you or not, you need those expertise in-house.
Yeah. All right. Does that wrap it all up?
I think it does. Dustin, do you want to remind people who you are and how they can get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Dustin Ray, I'm a consultant for non-technical founders. If you're starting or running a B2B SaaS software and running into any of these issues, please reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn by my name, Dustin Ray, or on redhook.agency.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.